same thing as this from that carnival, too.
Haven't you guys heard slavery's outlawed in the state of Jersey? Look at these guys. Oh, the Pied Piper.
Speaking of Mr. Cowl.
Oh, my God. Look at this place.
Oh, hi!
My wife came to supervise you guys. Is this unbelievable? Yeah.
I haven't seen you in ages.
How you doing, guys?
We're just getting started. But we're doing good.
I give you kids a remember.
Well, you guys, I'm telling you, if I knew you guys were this handy, I want to renovate my garage, too, you know? Hey, it looks good, though, doesn't it? Is this some shop to work in, or what?
Nice.
Oh, my God, look at this Roller King Roller Boy.
And I had no idea you had this kind of space. This is unbelievable.
Isn't this something?
It's unbelievable. And it'll be painted by the end of the day. Daryl's name isn't Daryl. Steve DeJulia is going to be so impressed.
We're still looking for another Daryl show up any moment now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, have Philly Flyer meetings down here. This will be great. Hey, we can hold Rodax contest inside the building. Save all that commuting out to Pennsylvania.
So, Karen, what's up?
Look at this. Got his table saw going, got his concrete pans. Oh, yeah, this is coming together.
And Peter, are you buying food? Did you bring anything to eat?
No, we got to buy a bird feeder.
He just got back, but we have these.
The truth is, we're going out to buy a bird feeder.
Suits for the wedding.
Uh-huh. Oh, what?
I am so impressed.
Navy pinstripe suits and a tailor.
Kyle, you have no idea. I think I'll have your father leave you with me for a week.
Hey, that's good.
You want to work in construction?
Who knows, right up there. Next time.
Now, Karen just noticed, open that refrigerator. Karen just noticed that we scammed her daughter's refrigerator. We're hiding it with a...
Do you need a full-size refrigerator? No, I got it.
Nah, open that up. Let me see what he's got in there. You got, what do you got? Juice, look at
I got
this.
juice, I got Coca-Cola.
Look at this.
I got
A radio, he's got a boom box up here. Oh my
You need a
God.
full-size refrigerator to come to my garage.
Oh my God. Scott Smith never had all this in his house.
Back this way.
I got one.
Scott, you never had your plans organized like this either. Look at this, organized.
Help you in the
Of
garden.
course, Scott was making money and Kenny isn't. That's the good. You guys have anything you want to say to Steve DeJulia?
I haven't had my...
Steve, you need your house painted?
Get a brush.
Trial's available. Oh.
So,
I like the yellow. Did you guys just do the yellow today?
One of the things, my philosophy, as always, is, and this is something now it's starting to pay dividends. A lot of times in the beginning, when you make a mold or a template or one of these molds, like we're going to use today, you always think to yourself, gee, that's a lot of work, and am I ever going to use it? Well, when I made this lettering up, this is the Strega lettering, I never really knew, to tell you the truth, how many people would use it, or if it would be used, if I'd even use it. But one of the things right now that's really handy is I have this plywood template, and we're doing up at our own leisure is putting together a Strega article. And in the Strega article, John Pothier, who's basically doing the typing and editing and helping me with it, he would like to come up with some nice logo that we can use, and instead of having to resketch this whole thing out or make a tracing off of the model or something that would be tremendously labor intensive, I have the template. So it's really, really handy. And I love having stuff that's kind of, I call it, in the bank. So I always try to plan any model and project with the idea in mind, if I'm going to spend the time to do this project, whatever it is, that I want to, at the end of the project, have something in the bank that I can either pass on to other people to help them, or in some way that it'll have some value other than just to me. So the molds that we used on the last tape, these I feel are in the bank. Many other people have used them. They seem to make really usable parts. And then I get to use them again too, so it's the best of all worlds. And some of these have already gone even over to Germany and stuff, so it seems like it was a good idea. I don't know if it really was. You don't really know, I guess, till the ball game's over. But anyway, having these templates now, all these little letters cut out of plywood and everything, this is going to make some future project a little bit better. Now, what's the point of all that? The point is, never knew when we did the Brodak Nobler, I never had any idea how popular these cowlings were going to be, and I've gotten to the point where I had to make a double cavity mold to keep up with the amount of people that are ordering cowlings through John. There's another problem with the mold. The mold with all these, making one every morning actually, the problem is I want to make a better mold. I want to make one where the parts are even a little bit better. And that's part of my philosophy too, is to, no matter what you're going to do, whether you're going to even just finish planes or each time you sand the silver you want it to get better, but to constantly strive for perfection. Now there's two ways you can go about doing that I know of. Number one is you can totally not enjoy yourself, become a Buddhist fanatic and sit under a waterfall and not. What happens when you do that is you lose the fun of modeling. Well, I try to take a little bit different approach. I try to take, let's make it as good as we can, but make it that it doesn't become rocket science and you're the only one in the world that can enjoy it. I want everybody to be able to enjoy this. So having said that, I come up with this great idea. This is the third nobler mold. Now the way I arrived at this, and I think this is significant enough, somebody might get an idea off of this that they can even make this better. Obviously this is not the last one either. The thing is we want to make these as practical so that average modelers can put these on planes and avoid having to do all that carving. But the idea is I want each one to get a little bit better than the one before it. The original mold that I made, the rubber was so thick, getting the part out sometimes was a little bit of a problem. And I wanted to come up with a way that was a little bit of an improvement. Now, George Ventrini's son gave me an idea. He used to be in the molding business, and what they used to do is make a box and run steel rods through the box, pour the molding rubber. Then when they were going to take the part out, they'd pull the rods out. That would release the mold so that the mold would now be very floppy and easy to separate. Well, I came home and I thought about it. How can I do that and put that to use in my case? Well, it turns out I thought about it, and I said, gee, I need to have those ribs in the rubber, those balsa wood ribs that are in the original mold rubber. I don't know how I can get around that. Then I came up with an idea, and I'll show this on the tape. What happens is I made a box around the mold so that this, in effect, you can see it's still sticky, comes out of it, and Karen looked at it and she said it's like putting a car in a garage. So I call this a garage mold. I'm sure in the molding industry, I'm sure in the real molding industry, there'd be people just that do this for a living that'd be laughing hysterical and say, does this guy know anything? But the truth is this mold makes usable parts. As crude as this is, it's all balsa wood. Now what that allows, once this is apart, what it allows is you can peel, because the mold is thinner, you can peel the mold back. I don't know if I can show this up close. You can actually just peel the mold right back off of the part. So it makes releasing it a whole lot easier. And the problem with all the other types of molding is you're always having trouble destroying the mold, getting the part out. How nice that comes out. So now there's always a couple little spots that you want to touch up. In this case, there's a little bit of air up here. Because of the way we're doing this, we're really not doing this in mass production or anything, but there's always some little touch-up spots. But now, the finish on this, if you look real close, let me show this up close. The finish on this is almost ready to paint. There's really a nice finish on there. And I would count this as a big improvement over the stuff that's gone before. So anyway, that's my whole point, is to constantly try to upgrade things, make them a little bit better. And today I'm going to be putting that bottom block on the fuselage. Well, you know what? I want to look for even better ways to do all the steps that we've done previously, constantly trying to make it easier so that average people can do this. So it's a common, ordinary thing to do it. It's not a big high-tech rocket science thing. And I think we're going to achieve some of that, at least in the next couple of days. No, I go over and over in my mind. I'm always hesitant to spend the time to do these parts, make templates, make things that will make replicating it easier, but in this case, now I'm glad I've done it again. It's the same thing with the cowling mold. It's the same thing with the molds. Same thing with every part of this is when you do it right the first time, you build a strong foundation. And the next time you do it, it's so easy, it's ridiculous. And now we're starting to reap the benefits because of building the first two of these planes. We have templates for everything, we have accurate plans, and we have the molds. That's what makes this a doable thing.
And it's funny, anytime you spend and you think, oh, geez, I'm spending all this time like these, these little landing gear, the mold for the little landing gear pieces, you think, oh, gee, it's all extra time, I could just carve that out of a piece of wood and I'm done with it. Well, but the problem with that is, then the second or third time around, you got to go back and do it all over again. And that's where having those molds, that's just so nice, so important to have all the mold, at least to me, because I want to be able to replicate these planes. And I want to be able to make accurate copies. I don't want to make a copy where mine is an inch longer than somebody else's. So just these 3 planes alone, being I have templates and plans for them, it puts me so far ahead of the game now that I'm actually trying to build a plane. It's pleasurable, and you can have the same thing just by getting accurate plans of anything and just using them. It's no problem at all. Now, speaking of that, Bob Martens is still busy working on the plans to this, again, so that we have an accurate set of plans. He's going to be making the plans for the I-beamer. He has the drawings for the ribs and the wing. All this stuff takes time, but once it's done, and you know, the thing is, everybody doesn't have to do it. You can always just buy the plans, but they have to be accurate to begin with. They have to be the right thing. They have to be that you can use them to your best advantage. And having them, to me, is so important. Now, when I look at what the choices are here, we want to work on molds today. Just going back to where I would have to first off buy 3 giant blocks, carve them, hollow them, and when I'm all done with it, I'd have 1 plane. The fact that I've already done that, and I already have that nice turtleneck part, and I already have these other parts, it means now I'm really a little bit ahead of the game. And I know I've been redundant about that. I know I've said it over and over, but the fact is, it's so important to understand why it's worth doing right in the first place. And once you have that concept, it seems like the rest of it just falls right into position. And the second or third time around, when you actually use these molds over and over again, you look in the mirror and you say, oh, why didn't I think of this years ago? And one final point before we get right to work. The point is, too, is when you want to make 2 models that are very identical, in this case the two original Spitfires, the advantage of molding is they are almost completely identical. They come off the same molds. Rather than being one's an inch higher or longer, the canopies don't fit. There's so many possibilities for error. The molds, if nothing else, they make it that 2 planes can be very identical. Now, in this case, what was significant is every time I found a trim change that worked on my plane, we could apply it to Joe's plane, the same as Ted Fancher and Dave Fitzgerald do. We could help each other back and forth. Joe would do some prop tests and say, try this one. I'd do it, try this one. Yeah, we're back and forth. We went back and forth between solids and braideds and handles and different length landing gear and different 5 blades. But the point is, every time we did one test, it worked for both of us. So it's a significant thing. If you're on board with that and you understand why it's worth doing the labor, it all makes sense, and it's something you can benefit from. Now, not to beat a dead horse here, but it just reminds me over and over again. These were back, I'll call these the good old days. This Cardinal was the original red one. And when I went to make this one, I had to recarve everything over again. I mean, and I'm just sitting here as the perfect example. I had plywood templates for everything. You can see I had plywood templates for every rib, every piece on the plane. But I still had to go back and do it. I had to do all that carving, all of that nonsense over and over again, every time I built the plane. Well, the other part is sometime in the spring or the summer, we are going to set up to do a lot more parts molding that I have never done before, like the reel pants and wingtips. I want to definitely, the direction I'm trying to take my program is that more and more of this stuff, in fact, even this fuselage had to be all carved and hollowed, that this program makes it easier for other people to build the models. Now, when Kyle Freeman, Brian Kiefer, any of these people want to build, or Mike Kajeski's building 2 of these right now, to replicate these parts, Midgley has the mold for this, that it can be done simply and inexpensively, and that's the direction I want my program to go in. Enough. Now back to the shop. I know I've repeated it. Well, I know this has nothing to do with model planes, but believe me, this is significant in my life. John Elway, finally, after all this time, 37 years old, he finally won a Super Bowl. And I keep thinking, well, maybe that's going to happen to me when I get to be 37. I'll win a Super Bowl. Anyway, it's just one of the things I wanted to mention. I have what I call inspirational things here. Now here they are. And it's Elway winning the Super Bowl late in his career. You know what? He went through a lot of lean years, which, I don't know, I guess is a parallel to my life. I've gone through a lot of lean years. And maybe that'll be me someday. But hey, if it isn't, it is not the end of the world, believe me. But I always think this is significant too. And I just remember the old man who they said couldn't win any more fights, bopping a young guy out and knocking him out. I love it. I just love it. Anyway, this is on my little, I don't know what to call it, but hey, it was good to see Elway win, and I'm ready to get back to work, believe me. You know, in my shop too, I also have one when I was out west with Karen. They let you buy a little piece of Crazy Horse Mountain, and I always have a little piece of Crazy Horse Mountain here, and I'm not going to go into the details, but again, these little inspirational things, when I look around my shop, the little things that remind me, and in this case, the thing that it reminds me of, that a lot of time when you're an artist, the work that you start doesn't get finished in your lifetime, and this was a very inspirational, significant thing, being out by Crazy Horse Mountain. Just one of the things that I keep around my shop. They're unusual, they're funny, whatever. They don't have any meaning or any purpose to anybody but me, but they help me do the work that I do. And I just thought I'd mention that. I'd just like to share that with you, because the truth is life is more than just building model planes. There's more to it. If you want to stick with it and you want to make it over the long haul, you need more than just a great rudder design. And again, to me, anytime I can make a little improvement or a different, this is the part of the hobby that I really enjoy. I really do enjoy when I can come up with some little invention or some little thing. I don't know, I just love it. It's just one of the things I really enjoy about the hobby. Little inventions. But it's inventions you can share. Here's one thing that a little help if you're going to do some layups. The cloth that you buy in square yards, you see what happens to the end of it when you cut it? Well, especially after your scissors get dull, after I've been cutting this stuff. I always pre-cut the parts because the resin system I have is a relatively fast resin system. But I found another nice little tip. This is like a, I don't know what the real trade name for it is, but it's got a woven edge. It's kind of like a bandage on both ends. And when you cut it, it's a little more tightly woven. By the way, if you start cutting fiberglass cloth on a regular basis, be prepared to either sharpen the scissors or buy new scissors on a pretty regular basis. It has a lot less tendency to come apart. So you do save a little time in the layup part. The fact that all these hairs are not making you crazy. It's nice actually if you could do the whole thing with this, but then you wind up with these little edges. If you have that edge going through the middle of a cowling, it just doesn't look as nice as if you didn't have it there. So what I do is I take this, which is a tighter woven material to begin with, and trim it. But I really am going to have to get some new scissors here. This is terrible. Again, you think I'm kidding. The scissors wear out quickly cutting fiberglass. There's something about fiberglass. They make fiberglass cutting scissors that have a different angle, but they're expensive, so I'm going to have to look into it. And I know Excel makes some nice scissors. I just haven't figured out which ones I need yet in the shop, but I sure am going to get some nice, look through their catalog this afternoon and maybe order a couple sets. So I've been trying to use up all these old scissors that I have. And this pair lasted probably 50, 60 cowlings, but you almost can't cut with them anymore. Anyway, having all the parts that I need pre-cut and using a West Systems resin with the quick hardener, this really just becomes a piece of cake. And this is one of the other tips I've found is and I mean that's a significant tip, get all the stuff cut ahead of time. I used to get halfway into the laying up the mold and then have to go over and cut some of these pieces that fit, and I get all the parts cut ahead of time, have the little riblets that go on the end. All my edges cut ahead of time. By having the stuff cut, it just minimizes the time that you actually, with the quick hardener, you really only have about 5 minutes to get the layup done. This is an important thing to get everything ready. See, now here's what would happen if you didn't have this little garage. This rubber part, by the way, this also saves money on time and energy on this molding rubber. And I finally do have a legitimate contact at GE that I can call for technical assistance. Somebody who seems like they really know what the heck's going on. Maybe getting some different rubber that they think is going to be a little bit better. But again, I'll pass it all on. I don't know if... I know there's 4 or 5 other people that have made cowls this way, basically with some of the information on the videos and in Stunt News, but it's always good information. Have it in a bank, even if you just want to know about it, even if you don't want to use it. The whole trick with most layup is to get used to that little motion of, I don't know what the real word would be, but when you're doing a layup, it's like a back and forth. You got to get it to stick tack down, get it maneuvered in place. Easy to learn though. I don't think there's any reason anybody should be afraid of making their own molds. I mean, it's been a little, the reason it's been labor intensive for me, because I haven't had anybody to teach me. If somebody had made a video of this, we would have done this years ago, but let's hope that that's part of what we can add to the hobby. This is the motion that's hard to get. Once you get it right, you're not picking the part back up. Scoop out all those little hairs that go in there. Okay, the next step on this fuselage, I always like to put 64th plywood edges down in here. So I'm going to cut up some strips, maybe 1/4 inch wide, and just laminate enough of them in here so that when I bring this curvature in here, I'll always be grinding into a 64th plywood edge. I'll never have it that I've run out of plywood and I'm just going to be laying in balsa wood, because ultimately the fiberglass cowl is going to lay in here, and I want it to be fiberglass to a plywood edge. Very important to keep the whole perimeter of this, the whole edge of it, plywood. I also, in my constant, always trying to upgrade things, I want to laminate a strip of this 7/1000 carbon fiber, this pre-cured. This is the Bob Violet stuff that Ken brought over. So I want to make it the same width. Now the idea of using this material, you can always use it so that the grain is working in your direction. In this case, I want the grain going in the wrong direction, because ultimately I want this to make a former that'll add some torque resistance to it. Again, that XL cutting pad is so nice to use. You get nice clean cuts. So now I have some strips of 64th plywood and some 7/1000 carbon fiber that I can laminate together, and that'll give me a real nice edge to start with. And now I'm laying these strips in here, and I want to make an accurate pattern because I want to cut the pieces ahead of time. And I want to be able to just laminate them in one right on top of another. And that'll basically be the pattern. A couple of tips. I always make the piece just a little bit oversized so it sticks up and I can trim it off. And also, before I CA it in, whenever you're doing plywood, I like to sand it with some fine sandpaper, 220, and leave the dust on.
When you leave the dust on, it fills the grain a little bit and gives you a much nicer, tighter, easier to sand joint. Just remember, I want this to add strength. At the same time, I don't want to build up any unnecessary weight. Now, I made this just a little bit oversized. It'll just be a question of gluing it in, and when it's all done, it's easier to make it oversized and then trim it to fit than it is to try to get it exact and then maneuver it into position while the CA is kicking off. Now we also have the same piece. I used a pattern. Same piece for the carbon fiber to lay it in there. Okay, now I got one side with the carbon fiber and a piece of plywood on. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side. And that'll give me some meat to work with when I'm laying out the cowling. Now if I find out I need more, I can just keep laying strips of 64th plywood in here, or balsa or anything really, because I have a nice hard edge to work off now. I'm not working off a soft balsa edge and trying to make a nice joint.
And of course, just use the same pattern over and over. You could actually add a couple more strips in there even if you wanted just to stiffen it up. And that gives you such a nice little edge to work off.
Okay, the next thing I need to do is get a Dremel with a parting wheel. Trim this. It's always easier to cut carbon fiber with a parting wheel. And then establish a nice edge here with a sanding block. And I also want to fill it. There's a little spot in here I want to put a triangle block because this is going to have to taper in. Get a nice soft block and get it blocked in here right now so that I can work on this whole area in one operation. Real handy for doing an edge are these carbide edge sanding discs, or whatever you want to call them. Now up in this corner, all through the building and finishing, this is always a problem sanding. So what I did, I took one of these carbide pieces and put the same, well, even less of an angle, undercut it back a little bit so that I can work my way up in there and I can work that edge. Now sometimes you have to make a tool, but of course this tool will have all the way through building a plane. That tool allows me to get right up in there without having a problem. Now if I didn't have that, see, this one doesn't have enough of an edge. It's a problem for the last little bit, and if you tried to do it with a sanding stick, it would still be a problem. But this is the whole trick is to get that same undercut angle in there. Now these are the little edges and angles that are hard to get. And yet when you get them, boy, does it add a nice little dimension to the overall impression you get when you look at the plane. And sometimes you have to make a little tool, but you know what? You'll have it forever. I just want to clean off the dust here. I want to seal these edges every step of the way. Uh-oh. President Nixon on the phone. Well,
Whenever you sand carbon fiber, you want to be really careful you get the edge. Now, the only trouble with the carbon fiber, it tends to make the wood around it black and kind of messy looking, but you're going to paint it anyway, and if you're looking to make pretty planes when they're in real wood, the carbon fiber is not going to help you, that's for sure. But anyway, now we have some nice edges to work with. I want to make those little triangle blocks out of scrap, get them in place, and I'll be ready to move on. Great little tip. You see what happens when you're sanding carbon fiber? You get all this black stuff on the sandpaper. We got that little eraser that John Pothier sent a while back. You can buy these at woodworking stores, and it takes the stuff right off the sandpaper. It doesn't resharpen the sandpaper, but it gets that black stuff off so you don't have such a mess. I don't like the look of when that wood starts turning all black and slimy. Another nice little tip. The black sanding dust always winds up with the CA making a little kind of a funky color on the wood. But if you can get some of it off this way, the only problem is as soon as you go to sand it, of course, sandpaper turns black again, so you have to go back and forth a few times. Erase the sandpaper, or obviously you could replace it. You get that nice carbon fiber edge, but without the black. Now, the next time you seal it, see, here's what happens. Each time you seal it, it gets a little bit less prone to picking up that black edge. Now, if you keep after this, all during the construction of the plane, you'll wind up in the final analysis is you'll have a really nice cowl parting line, and it's really worth doing. I think it is anyway. If you want to be in that front row all by yourself year after year, it takes little details like this to separate you away from the pack. And in the final analysis, see what you want to have. You want to have that cowl parting line that it looks like you just took a razor blade and went right down it. You don't want to have that it's wavering and slobbering and everything, and you can do it time after time after time. This little procedure that I use, it just seems to work for everybody all the time. Okay, now I just wanted to get some scrap blocks, get them in here, so I have a little more meat up around the front here when I blend that nose ring in. Now from some scrap I can just rough out blocks. Once I make one, and I can mirror image out to the other side. I'd like to have the grain going top to bottom, so give me a little bit better edge in the final product. So obviously it's just a roughing out operation. Now what I did, I put some nice scrap blocks in here, I want to show. These are just scrap, just to triangulate this all out, and now I can get in there with a Dremel tool and I can get some contours and shapes in there. I always like to get a final sanding on this in here because I'm going to soak it with thin CA. And once I soak it, I want to keep these edges in shapes. Always having the right sanding tool is half of any job, and somewhere in the scheme of things, you figure out the ones you need and you don't need. Now, one thing I looked at right away that I thought was real close to being right, and this is always my test, is I have the fuselage that the nose ring is just going to disappear off this side of the fuselage. If you look at it real, I guess you can't see it through the camera so easily, but I have about a 1/16 of an inch of fuselage to sand away here, and I need to add just a little bit here. What I'll add with some air epoxy or something to final sand up. But what it tells me is that I have the motor just a little bit offset in that 1 to 2 degree range that I like. If you were sanding and both sides of this fuselage are coming off evenly, you know you don't have any motor offset, and maybe that's what you want. But this is now a good test that you're coming up on the ballpark of where that offset should be. And again, that's where this having a sanding block that you can get right in the corners is so handy now. Seems like a lot of little detail stuff, but the end result is you have a nose section, at least the ones we've had, that you go years and years and years and you don't get all kind of little funny cracks and whatever. Now once you get it even half set, let me just... This hardens up the wood, and then we have an angle we can sand off. Okay, that about finishes up the nose area, and that about finishes up all I'm going to have time for in this session. So when I get back here tomorrow, well, maybe I get back here tonight, I don't know. What I want to do is I want to lay out the bottom block. That's going to be the next step in this program. But so far, the way this is shaping up, it looks like it's going to be a real nice fuse. One of the things about molded shell construction, at least this type, let's say you had this fuselage shape, just trying to make a very simple analogy here. And this is the shape that you pretty much, the original, the first number 1 Spitfire was pretty much this shape. It had 3/8 mounts. So that was the shape. Now along comes the number 2, the Seafire, had an 1/8 inch wider fuselage in all dimensions. And I liked the fact it was more scale-like. It was one of the things I liked about the plane. So what happens is, now I've pretty much got another mold for this shape here. But now I get to the last one. This fuselage has 5/8 mounts. So now I'm way out here, much wider. And I don't know, and this is the adventure of the whole thing. This is the adventure, oh, that answer phone. Okay, let me finish the analogy. With the 5/8 mounts, see, I'm not really sure I'm going to be able to do this. But that's the adventure of having a model, of different models. And I don't know at what point, I mean, I don't know that next year's plane I can't use 3/4 inch mounts until I find a point at which performance drops off. But now if you look at this, it's almost like you do a photo enlargement. And what I think is going to happen, but again, I don't know, and this is the fun of doing it, is I'm maintaining, if you were to look at this, the same radius. Yeah, I've got the same center point, no matter how big. If I make this body 1 inch, I'm using the same center point. So I'm thinking with that original mold, and this was the original mold, and this may or may not work, but boy, I'd sure like to know if it does work. Up to a point, if I just kept laminating over this, like I'm doing here, and I have one laminated right on top of the other. You would think I could laminate the next one, I could bring this out almost infinitely. And so what it would mean is, now I only have to make one mold for any given model, and I can almost scale it up and scale it down up to a point, and it could be that maybe, I could do 7/8 mounts, I don't know. At some point in time, because I wanted the original plane to be as much like a normal, average stunt ship. I didn't want to take a chance that the fuse would get too big or too gawky or not look right in a stunt pattern. A lot of things can happen. But I was real happy with the original Spitfire, so was Joe. The Seafire I'm even more happy with. So now I get to this point. Now it could be that at some point in time this fuselage is going to grow to be too scale-like. It'll look too big in the pattern, and I've heard that comment from other people. But in theory, now the same thing goes with the bottom block, the top block, the cowls. You would think all I need to do is when I take the original mold, I make the original piece, and I have enough material left over. All I'm really talking about doing here is possibly adding 1/8 of an inch onto each side. So what I'm going to try to do is where that little wire marks the edge here, and that would be the wire point, where that point is, I want to extend it out maybe 1/8 of an inch to start with, so that I actually am adding length to it. In other words, here's the original line that gets cut into the wood from being in the mold, and if I extend this down 1/8 of an inch, it gives me a lot of extra material to work with. And what I'm hoping, the obvious hope of all this, is that I can use the original molds to make up a fuselage that's quite a bit wider. Now, we found that to be true. The same one that works on the Spitfire works on an Obler. It works on a Gieske Obler. It works on a Cardinal. It works on a Smoothie. It works on... Just by adding and taking away dimension, you can really customize. And what I'm hoping is, by having one mold, what this means is you almost can use the same mold as long as you're maintaining the same shape. You almost only have to carve 1 or maybe 2 or 3 molds for the rest of your life. And when you're done, all of these molds can be shrunk down and opened up, and with shims, possibly that's where the real gain in this whole program is going to be. I don't know, but within the next couple of days, we're certainly going to find out. Now, the first thing I want to do today, again, time is limited, so I'm trying to make the most use of the time. I want to trace out this line. This is the impression line that comes out in the mold, and then I want to add to it. And I'm thinking the easiest way to do that is just going to be to lay a piece of tape right up along this. If you get a look at how I've done this. I still have the 2 shells together in one piece, so what I want to do is I just want to lay some tape across the edge here, and that'll give me the little additional material that I'm going to need. Yeah, I don't know if 1/8 of an inch is going to be enough, so I'll leave it 1/8 of an inch on the plus side when I make the cut. Some of this tape that I got from John Brodak, this leaves a nice edge to work with too. Trying to use up the last little bit here. Anyway, again, the whole fun of modeling, the whole thrill of doing this is trying to see if you can do things that previously you haven't been able to do, or come up with some inventions of your own. I mean, that's the fun of this. If you just took the same model and built it over and over and over and over again, never added anything to it, never changed it, well, you'd probably have some competitive advantage in the fact that they'd all fly the same or whatever, but I think you would miss the big picture. You'd miss the fun. And I've given it a little plus, and then I'm going to cut along that line, get a brand new XL blade, and I cut along that line. That'll give me roughly 1/8 of an inch extra material. So because that line hasn't really come out on the outside shell, it's only on the inside shell, so it'll basically transfer that flat line, I hope, out into the second shell. Hey, we're going to find out in a few minutes here. This is half of the fun. Easiest way I know to get a nice even cut here is let the knife rest on the other side, even though it may be a little bit off, and take one little slice out at a time, even with the tape.
It's really hard to lay this down and get the whole thing done in one swoop. Otherwise, you wind up with an angle. If I can get right up to the tape with just a little bit extra, you can see that worked out pretty well. I have some overage up on the front here. I'm going to leave that on until I get this set right in place for the last cut. And now it'll just be a question of cutting the other side. Now I do have a nice flat area to work off, so this cut should be almost perfect. Pretty optimistic about, I'm going to get this line, pretty optimistic about how this is going to work out.
Now the rest of this, after I take the tape off, I want to lay out some of that sticky back sandpaper. In fact, I already have some laid out, so that I have a giant sanding block to true this up on. Okay, now tell me where you came from to see my shop.
I come from Brazil, São Paulo.
And your wife, what's your wife's name?
She's
Maria Helena.
Oh, you come all the way from Brazil to see the Spitfires.
to see all your Spitfire, to see your place, to see your shop, and to see the way you play with the...
Play with planes is the right way. Now, you could play these tapes in Brazil, there's no problem, right?
Yes, no
Well,
problem.
you're going to have a lot of tapes. I hope you got a suitcase when you go home.
You know, our tapes in Brazil is like your VHS.
Right.
And the NTSC system works because we have machines with the VSC.
Oh, okay.
The NTSC. No, normally in Brazil, the broadcasting is PAL M. It's like the European PAL.
Okay.
PIL. We have the deviation M. And but as you have the original VHS, both in the United States, you can play your video. All the films we buy are NTSC.
Okay.
So when we have a camera, you know, we make a shots with these cameras.
But see, if you make tapes in Brazil for me, I can play them here.
Yes.
I just can't make copies. I can
Yes.
play them here's no problem. I just can't make copies.
Yes.
I don't have a machine that can copy from that mode to my mode, but I can play it. I just get Cowl to just make me a copy, but I can't make a copy. By the time I make a copy, it's all full of white dropouts.
If I made the video in Brazil in NTSC,
Right.
you can play here in color, no problem.
No problem. Well, you're going to send me a lot of tapes, right, of all the world championships and the women on the beach. I want a lot of women on the beach. Look, his wife doesn't want to hear about this. My daughter went to Argentina last year. She went to Argentina. Peru is in Argentina? No.
No, Peru.
She went to, what's the capital of Peru?
Peru is
Lima. She went to Lima.
It's capital of Peru.
She went to Lima and she said, oh my, beautiful. Everything is beautiful.
Yeah, the Argentina is more in the south.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful country.
Yeah, you know, I used to play with their models 20 years ago, and 20 years ago I make only 2 airplanes, competitive airplanes.
Okay.
It's like a Nobler size.
Okay.
It's a Brazilian design called.
How many people in Brazil fly planes? How many rough? 10, 15, 100?
I don't know.
But you show, see, if you learn this, when you learn this, I'm going to give you all the tapes. When you learn this, you show the other people.
Yeah.
And they show the other people. Then everybody has it. If you don't show anybody,
Yes, this is some problem in Brazil. Everybody wants to keep the secret.
oh,
Yes,
no good.
And I tell to the people every time we go to a meeting to play. I tell to the people, why did you do that?
How about Benny Rodriguez? You know Benny Rodriguez?
Yes,
Good man.
yes.
He was fun at the Nationals. He come to the Nationals.
He asked me to
say
tell you.
Okay, yeah, he's a good man. He's a lot of fun. We went with him to have dinner, have lunch, and all the girls like him. He's like a...
Yeah, he's a...
I don't know if he's married or not.
Yes, he is.
Benny, you're in trouble. Benny, we were calling him Benny in his jet. I got pictures. I'm going to show you pictures of him. And he flies very well.
Yes,
Yeah, he's a good guy. But I'm going to give you the tapes from the Nationals. Benny is on the I think Benny got a set of the National tapes. We'll find tapes of Benny tonight.
If he has the tapes, he keeps for him.
Oh, yeah. No, you give him nothing.
See this? It's just like
I have
United States 20 years ago.
I have a friend called Carlos. He's not the top 10 like
Okay.
I am.
Okay.
I am not the top 10 also. And we always fight with the people to divide our knowledgement, you know.
Share it.
As you say in your magazines.
Share it, of course.
You need to share what you know.
Oh.
But the people don't like to do that in Brazil. They
Oh, no.
secret.
Well, if you take some pictures of the people on the beach, all the young girls, I'll give you all the videos you want.
Okay,
No problem.
I will send a lot of pictures.
Firsthand, how much did you learn from the tapes? Even the ones I sent you in the mail.
I learned more than 20 years
All right.
for the Brazilian friend.
Okay, now how much do I have to pay you to say that? That's just
No.
$50?
You didn't pay for it.
Second question, you have John Brodak stuff in Brazil?
No.
Okay, I'm going to give you a catalog from John Brodak.
Yes, I
Here's John Brodak stuff. Look in the catalog, Howard. Take that. Show him on the camera. Show him. John, you got a new customer in Brazil. See that? He loves you already.
I go down to Brazil with your catalog. Maybe I will be a distributor for you in Brazil.
Yeah, no problem. If John doesn't want to send it, I'll send it. No problem.
Okay.
Beautiful stuff. He's got a lot of beautiful stuff in there. All for control line, too.
Yeah.
You know, we caught him trying to shoplift the Spitfire out of the cellar. Look at this. He wants to pretend like it's his. Oh, yeah, Benny, I just put a hole in Wendy's Spitfire. Look at this. Don't break it. Oh, my God. Look at this guy.
Hey, you don't let me walk around.
You gotta believe it. Watch. Here goes the rudder. Say goodbye to the lead-outs. Oh! Look at this guy. Benny, eat your heart out. The pride of São Paulo, Brazil.
Yeah, but
Benny Rodriguez.
You can't take it home.
That's what he thinks. He's in the Brazilian mafia. They take what they want.
Levanta ele pouco. Aí.
How do I know he's not cursing me out in Brazilian or something
Meu
here?
irmão veio.
Yeah, let's see the bottom. See if you can put a hole in the bottom, too. I don't know if I trust this Portuguese language going on here.
Do outro lado. Aí. Aí.
So you're going to make one just like it. Now that you have Spitfire plans? Look how much stuff this guy bought. I mean, if I knew he was going to buy this much stuff, I would have bought him pizza.
American money?
No, I didn't pay me with some funny Brazilian money. It looks like Monopoly money to me.
Pra cá.
I wouldn't trust them at all.
Como você achar melhor os detalhes?
Now listen, I want some pictures from Brazil, you know?
I will send you.
Get some pictures of Benny. I want to see Benny flying it. Benny and the Jets. We used to call him Benny and the Jets from when he was at the Nats. Every time he walked by, they'd be going, Benny and the Jets.
Yes, I know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
You're going to build one just like it. Don't worry. No problem.
I will take.
It only took me 2 weeks to make that.
2 weeks. Maybe I
And Kenny painted it in one afternoon.
will take 2 decades. I will take 20 years.
Oh, God.
2 years. If
Hey, you know, I can. Just think of this. That'd be a good day to put some clear on an Obla. Nice and dry out there, yeah.
Essa mudança de tinta.
I just wrote in this month's column that we were waiting for a day like
Yeah, we're waiting. It's cold, though. It's really not warm out there.
Essa mudança de
do you use all the big gun or do you use a small?
So a touch-up gun, they call it. A small touch-up gun.
But it's not a brush. It's not the small one they use for the
No, not an airbrush. Never. Never. I don't even have an airbrush.
It's the small gun.
Yep. I don't even have an airbrush. I don't like airbrushes at all. When you go to pull a tape up, the paint comes up when you use an airbrush.
Tá vendo, Mário? É papel.
How many rivets you think are on there?
4,000?
4,700.
4,700.
Kenny was keeping track when we did it.
4,700.
I don't think so. Anyway, you showed us videos, all of these videos. You got more videos. You're going to be the king of Brazil. I mean, Benny, you can have Benny crawling around on his knees coming over for information. Oh, man. Benny and the Jets.
Benny and the Jets. I remember that.
Benny. Okay, it's hard to believe we had so much fun this afternoon. Sergio and his wife. We really did. We had pizza. we were making fun of Benny and the Jets and all that stuff. I think he has the biggest collection of videos now outside the United States, probably in Brazil. Anyway, the next step on this, I want to, really, it's been a long day, can't believe it. I want to get another hour or two in tonight. But what I really want to do is pull the tape up now. I've added 1/8 of an inch to this, and then take it over to my sanding, whatever you want to call this, my block sander, and try to get a true edge on it. You can see there's not, in fact, I have to cut this piece off up here. But the edge isn't perfectly true, and I only want to true it up as much as I need to catch the outer surface here. Again, we're doing this step by step, and I really want to see how this is going to work out in the ultimate plan of things.
Now, usually you can get this in only a few swipes. Hey, I tell you, it really is fun having people from all over the world around here. Makes me feel like I know what I'm doing. This is another one of those real nice tips. Just having this sticky back sandpaper glued down to a piece of glass, down to anything, even a flat piece of Formica would be fine. Try to put the pressure on with your hand. Remember, we're sanding 2 at once here.
Now, once I take this off, now I can do the final little bit. And I noticed I don't have a piece on the back. Come on. I don't have a piece on the back that's actually long enough to pick this up, so I may have to splice in a little piece. But the front of it is kind of true now, so I can get an idea as to if this is really going to fit or not. You see what a tight fit even now this is. And here we have one undersize, one oversize, and they're both dressed off of the same line now. We used the line to go through the second piece of sheeting. Okay, it's a reasonable fit actually. I don't think it's going to need a lot of trimming at all. Except I know I've added to the length, so I know I'm going to wind up with a little block at the back. You know what I did? I wound up taping the bigger of the 2 blocks in place, just so I could see how close, and I don't know if you can see, it's plenty close. I mean, it was as close as the other one was when I made it from a dedicated mold. In the back, what happens is, because the wood is springing now, what I'm going to do is eventually put this back into the mold and press it down again to get more of a kink in it in the last couple of it, maybe 6 inches. But I want to cut the front off, and the way to do that is to get this taped in place, get this all nice and solid, and then leave yourself maybe 1/8 of an inch of extra material. In this case, I put 1/8 inch tape here. Cut this off with a little bit extra, and then using a block, get the final fit with a block. That's the best way to get that whole operation, that it's a nice tight fit. Now, before we even sand this, I want to tack this down with 1 drop of glue, and I want to get it out over the edge enough. Just 1 drop of glue in here will do it. And then I'm ready to block sand that edge in, because that's going to be the edge where the cowling sits. Now the trick is to look right down that line and try to get a straight line for the cowling. And the best way that I know to do that is take it over to the old sanding block like so. Well, this thing just comes in so handy. We use this 1,000 times a day. Try not to pull the nose ring off. You really get a nice, all in one shot, you get a nice edge. And you can see how nice and thin and hollow that body is when you're done with it. And that shell, by the way, the only part of it, and I've been looking at it over and over again, it may be, you see how it doesn't fit in the back? But it may be that I can just soak it with a little ammonia and squeeze it in, or in the worst of worlds, you know, I could take it over to another mold, carve a little, I could use the turtle deck mold. Not really, I could do that though in a pinch that nice and tight together, and I would have accomplished something, because I built a totally different plane without, totally, it's a quarter of an inch wider without having to go through any aggravation of even carving new molds. Now with the bottom block off, I know it's a little bit too wide, so what I'm going to do is take this mold here. This is the Spitfire mold. This has a lot more taper in the back. You see how much more taper there is? I'm going to wet the back and measure out it's about the length of my hand, that it's too wide. Just wet this down with ammonia and put a bandage on there just to hold that in place, or a little piece of tape or something, just to put a little more kink in that rib.
Now, it's only really the last 6 or 8 inches of this, so I want to wet this with ammonia first. Phew, stuff really stinks. Now I can take this piece, knock that over on the table, and put that kink in it. And if it's too much, I can just relax it. Can do this, I don't even need an ace bandage, I just need some masking tape just to hold this back down. I'm not looking to make a radical change in shape here, and we've got 90% of it already. I just like to get that wood relaxed. And by the way, it's a good idea if you're making molds and you're going to leave the parts unattended for 6 or 8 months, it's a good idea to make them just before you use them. In this case, maybe a while before we can use these, but it's always a good idea. In fact, I have a little jig that holds the part in place. So this will be fine, in fact. No one I'm worried about. Gonna be an old lady about some of this stuff. And we'll see. Now, if it needs a little more, you can still clamp down a little more. If it needs less, we can spread. You have a lot of flexibility with this molding system. You're really not locked into where you can't make changes until you actually put the piece right in position on the airplane. And boy, I don't care what anybody says, you would never be able to carve a block this light and this strong. That's out of the question. I mean, the thing is like a parachute.
Now looking from the top down, you can see basically just about how much we have to make up on the nose section. So what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to put some shims over this. I don't know if it's going to be, it looks like it'll be an 1/8 inch on each side, maybe a little more. But I'll build it up with a couple of shims and pretty much repeat the whole process, so that I'll have 2 or 3 pieces on here. I need to make it a little bit longer too, because this fuselage is longer and wider at the same time. Again, going for that more scale-like look. And again, it'll be very easy then with a little extra material up in the front and in the back that I can kind of get it tapered right in and notched in, a little dovetail joint right into the nose ring when this is done.
I think we really lucked out here in terms of molding. And you see what happens as you build a little collection of shims and molds, and you're playing musical chairs with everything. This mold we know is a little bit too thin, but we just happen to have an extra shim around. In fact, while I was looking through my pile of junk, I found a second shim. And so what happened is, this was the original shim that was supposed to go on there. This then became the second one, and this would be for a 1/2 inch fuselage. Now, I'm all set. All I need to do is make one more piece on top of this, and I think I'll have it in one stroke of the pen here. I don't think I'll even need, I may need the second piece. What I'll do is I'll put this piece on, so I'll take the original shim out, put this piece on. This will probably get me right down to the wire. Now what I'm going to try just to see if it'll work, because again, I'm experimenting, and I'm willing to learn some stuff along the way here. What I'm going to try is I'm going to tape this in position, just to see if this is a viable way of doing it. Boy, but when you think of all the carving you would have to go through to replicate this much stuff. Oh man, I mean, $40, $60 worth of blocks, chips all over the floor, all of a sudden this looks like not the worst deal in the world. Now another thing I could do here, again, this is the kind of stuff you got to make it up as you go along. One of the things I can do is I can even add some side pieces to this if I want to. But I'm going to do it once without the side pieces just to see what the curve looks like. Now, looking around at this and trying to improvise as I always do, I just came up with an interesting thought. We have an extra bottom block. This is an extra piece that we're not using right now. And since this is probably one of the best pieces of wood I have here. So I was thinking, I can re-wet this. Now, what's nice is I already put an edge on this. So I can leave a little bit sticking out the front, and I can just eyeball, see how the edge runs down the wire? I might be able to get this that I don't even have to recut it. Worth a chance, because what have I got to lose? It's going to ultimately be a shim anyway, so why not take a chance? So what I can do is answer the phone, like I said. Alright, this wrapped up nice. In fact, in the front I can see I might even have a little extra material. I need to make up that for the extra length of the fuselage, so even if I have a little overhang, it'll be okay. And this is about all I'm going to get done tonight. I was hoping I'd get the shell, well, maybe I ought to stay up and I will make the shells up so they can be in a mold for the turtle deck. But that basically will cover me on that shell, and I can put this one away. Now you can see how much I have to make up here in terms of thickness on a turtle deck. And so I'm going to stay up tonight, try to laminate up the sheets that I need and get this guy up drying. I guess it'll just get me one day ahead here if I can get this one. Probably get a couple of pieces of 16. See, I have to figure this out. But that's the whole adventure. The whole adventure is how do we get all this stuff to fit and jive, and hey, when it's all done, it's exciting. Anyway, same exact thing here. I need to thicken this up by approximately an eighth of an inch, maybe 2 pieces of 16th. I'll have to see what I got in inventory as far as shims go. Now, believe it or not, I found a decent piece of wood, and the only problem is the phone's been ringing so much today that I'm beat tired. And there's a message, not even a message, there's an excellent lesson to learn from it. When you're real tired like it is this time of night, don't cut your finger off, go to sleep. Many nights I've stayed up late like this. I said, if I could just get one more top block made or one more cowling molded or something. And you know what? Never pays. The next day you're sorry you did it. I really want this to be as quality of a plane as I can possibly make, so I'm going to put it aside till tomorrow. Go up and see my honey pie. I'm really tired. This has been a long day. Benny and the Jets. Now this morning I start the day off with couple of things that came in today's mail. I wanted to get the mail out early so I can work on this fuselage. This is from Fred Madden, and he's in Canada and in Hamilton, Ontario. And this is a Cardinal kit that he's been working on. It looks like it has the molded top block option. Nice set of wheel pants, by the way, looking this over. I'm going to show you one other picture here that looks real good. Now, he didn't write any captions on these, but I think you can get the idea from looking at it. It's got that real Cardinal look. And I thought this was funny. Now, notice the number on the rudder is 4. Now, see, because there's no captions on these pictures, Fred, we need captions. It looks like he
he beat me to the punch with the profile cardinal option here. Anyway, a picture of him riding in the canoe. Now, I don't know it, since it doesn't say. I'm sure what he's doing is telling me to eat my heart out. To tell you, this looks like my cellar after it rained over at the old two-family house. Anyway, from Fred. And this is what I love. When I see this, this is Fred signing his mail like Wendy. I know I've had some impact on his life. Thanks a lot, Fred. Also in today's mail, a nice letter from Argentina. It was ironic that we just had Sergio here from Brazil yesterday. Sent me in some pictures of some of the South American, there's a whole bunch of pictures here, some of the South American activity. There's only one problem, I don't speak Spanish, but I get a feeling that somehow that's how you say cardinal in Spanish. Anyway, we're Brazilian, I don't know here. Anyway, obviously the date is 1997. This must be their local contest or their team or something. Anyway, he sent me some other little pictures, and this is some of the little ships that he's working on. Looks like a profile here. Man, you got to remember, the people outside the United States don't have access to Rodak kits or SIG kits or anything. They're really working on their own. And he's got couple of pictures here of what he's working on. He's trying to use monocoat on the wing and paint the fuselage. Looks like a Pathfinder. Again, what's wrong is you need captions. When people send you pictures, it's nice, but if I know them personally or I know who they are, it's really nice, but hard to figure it out when you don't have captions. But it looks like they certainly have it's obviously a soccer field or something to work with. And he also sent me a thing for I guess it's their equivalent of the Nationals. It's amazing, once you get out of the United States, how this hobby changes and how different it becomes. Anyway, from Argentina, appreciate it a whole lot, and we will be sending you off some pictures. And now that they have a bunch of these windy videos down in South America, they'll probably all have front row finishes soon. And let's hope they're going to buy some Brodak kits too. Get some Nobler kits going down here. Now this is from Larry Shoemaker. How many people get a brand new vinyl Bing Crosby record in the mail? From Larry Shoemaker. Now I know he sent a bunch of VSC photos, and I'll run those through the mill here before I return them, just so we get everything on video. And this really preserves it and allows us to share it. You know, you see them all in Stunt News, but you don't get to see them in color, and you don't get to see them this quickly. Anyway, I'll try to get George to make me a copy. I don't have a player. That's the only problem. I'm lucky I got a normal radio. But anyway, let's combining John Brodak's music with the now. We have some Bing Crosby music. Hey, you don't think I'm old, do you? Okay, I'm just gonna run these through quickly. This is pictures that Larry Shoemaker sent in from the last VSC. Some nice pictures. We'd like to get them immortalized here if we can. Looks like from this picture, this is the people that I know off the top of my head. This is Ted Fancher, of course, Keith Trossel. See if any of these have captions. Again, this is a really nice set of photos, and I really appreciate that Larry's sharing them with us, because I don't get to go to VSC. Looks like that might be Bill Zimmer's smoothie, but I'm not sure. I think he did have a red and white one. Nice Cavalier. Ted and Keith's Chiselers. Again, I just don't know who a lot of these pictures belong to. This looks like Ed Southwick's plane. And this looks like George Aldrich here. This has the look of Looks like Andy Lee's, it isn't though. Maybe it is. Can't tell, I'd have to look at the AMA number. Andy Lee's in power. Maybe it isn't Andy Lee, so hold judgment on that one. Nice All American. There's old Ed Southwick right there. Ed, you still look good for a young man, I'll tell you. I would assume this is Larry Shoemaker's house. Nice house, by the way. Anyway, Joe and Peggy Ortiz stayed with him down in Missouri when they, on their way to their new home in Arizona. Here's George. Pictures of Larry's house. Larry Shoemaker, one of my longtime friends. I got to tell you a little off-the-wall story. One time I had sent Larry Shoemaker some videos years ago, and he responded by recording for me every movie that ever had a Spitfire in it, and about 20 that didn't have Spitfires in it. Sent me all these copies of movies, so for about a year we never had to go to a video rental store. This looks like one I haven't seen yet. This looks like a beauty. Oh, P39, that's a nice one. Picture of Billy Rhodes, Bobby Hunt. Caption on that one is me and my pal Lou Willard. Well, I really appreciate the pictures. We haven't had really this. Ken Thompson's going to go crazy when he sees this. It's the exact color he painted his Noble here. Somebody beat him to the punch. This is Bob Palmer's Thunderbird 610 is Bob Palmer's AMA number. Another picture of Lou Willard. This looks nice. Nice warbird. Couple yet to be covered and finished. I'm assuming that's Larry's bedroom. Pictures of the Chiselers. Picture of Bob Whiteley's 57 Chevy, all restored, beautiful car. I guess he liked these Chiselers. There's a lot of Chiseler pictures here. Anyway, what I like about having these pictures on the tape is now even if these photos were to get lost in the mail, we can be sharing these with people all over the world. We can be sharing them with people in Brazil and Argentina very soon, since they're obviously going to be on the hit list to be looking at these videos. Sergio left here with enough videos. He could go in his own business down there. Oh, you really like the Chiseler, huh, Larry? Anyway, thank you very much for the photos. I appreciate it. We will be returning something of interest, Larry. I don't know what. You know, my old set of false teeth or something, but appreciate it a whole lot. All right, this morning I want to cut off the tape and see if we got a little bit more of the curve, because see what I want to do is every time that if I need to make this a little wider or a little narrower, you have a lot of options, a lot of flexibility here. And this will pretty much get this guy that he's in the bank, and then I can start working on that nose section. Now, if it was a little too thin, too thick, see you early in the morning when you don't have your coffee yet? Might even try putting it on the right side. Right up the front. I can squeeze that right into position, no problem at all. That'd be perfect. Now, until I'm ready, I can just put this aside now until I'm actually ready to do the venting and all those things. But I would normally do that today, except I want to get this nose piece laid up because then I can work on the turtle deck. So the idea is I'll always have one piece to work on while one piece has got the ace bandage wrapped around it drying. Always a little time management here. This is ready to go except for the venting. I would actually put this away. Now what I did,
last year or the year before, I made a little storage rack. This is just a piece of scrap balsa with two little pieces of quarter-inch. And what this does, if you leave this for maybe a month, 2 months, what happens, this wood wants to relax back down to shape. But if you make a little fixture, and you can make it out of scrap wood, what you do is you snap this in here, and this is just to store it so it doesn't lose its shape. You can see how that fits right in there. That'll basically keep its shape indefinitely. Now, if I didn't even think of this last night, one of the things I could have done, if I wanted a little more curve back here, I could have soaked it with ammonia and just forced it further back in the end. But again, it doesn't matter exactly how you do it. The important thing is that you wind up with a shell that's super light and that really fits the way when you drop it in position, you don't lose the whole corner edge trying to fill it with Bondo or sanding it paper thin. You get that nice, even thickness of material around the whole fuselage side. Anyway, we put this aside now. This is done. And this guy's been up by the heating vent drying. Check, what's this tape on here? Once you put this stuff aside to dry overnight, I've heard that you can, in an hour, you can take the bandage off. I like to let it sit overnight. I think it's just cheap insurance. But this, now that we've made two of them, we have two options. I can leave this piece right on the mold, get an idea how this is going to fit up here. Again, I laid out the edge here because what's happened when you do these kind of curves, where it's a disappearing curve, what happens is I've picked up the nose ring, the thickness of this material. So I need to put an angle back in to drop that nose piece down. And I need to roughly do the thickness of the material, which is about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to take maybe 3/32 off. I laid out some tape, that gives me a reference line, and then I'll try to do the last little bit, block sand it down little by little by little until I just get that to sit just the way I want up in the front. The technique is lay the knife on one side. What will happen if you put the knife up like this, you're going to wind up having to sand off a lot more than you want. So to trim this, and leave a 1/16, even a little more, goes without saying, get a brand new XL blade in there. Don't fool around trying to use up your old blades or something. You can work your way right down the tape. I mean, knowing how to fit these shells up, it's not rocket science, that's for sure. There's a couple of simple rules that always apply. Now the rest of it, that extra little bit I'll do with the sanding, the little piece of sandpaper on the table until I get exactly the fit I want. And even if I go too far, it's not a problem. I can make another one of these shells up and tomorrow morning be drying up with another one. Or if I wind up with the shape wrong, I can take that piece off and then just use thicker material. I have so many options. Once you understand how to make the shells bigger, how to make them smaller, the rest of it all just kind of follows in unison. Now, one temptation you always have when you're doing a shell like this is to push down on it. What happens when you do that, you're basically spreading it. So it's kind of important that you squeeze together as you're pressing down to maintain that angle. You'd like to get the two sides to join up without in a nice tight glue joint where the side doesn't have an angle sanded into it already. Just requires a little practice. None of it is extremely difficult to do. And it is another thing, it isn't really important, super important, to get the nose part of it exactly right. Because we're going to put a little doubler inside anyway, and that's going to stiffen up the nose section. And that little bit of weight up there, even if it's a grain or so, is not going to make any difference. Sometimes you make yourself crazy to get 1 gram of wood out of the flame, and it takes you 4 hours to get it out, and then you go paint, 1 extra shot with the spray gun, and you're right back to where you were. Now what it means is you have to go back and forth with this operation and just constantly be checking to see how close you're getting. And you just need to go back and forth as many times as necessary until you have that the fit that you're looking for in the tank. Another way you can keep even pressure on it. Now because the shells are so light, there's a certain amount of squeeze. In other words, you could squeeze them a little bit, you can spread them a little bit, but you really don't want to overdo that. You just want to use that as a last resort. You'd like that to be a perfect fit up there if possible.
Now, an important thing to remember with this, or if you're trying to adapt one mold to another plane, one of the things that you always have the option of doing, you see how we're a little bit on the small side here, not a whole lot, but if I move this forward, gee, just 1/8 of an inch or so, changes. Well, I can move this forward and forward until it really is a real accurate fit. In fact, right about, I gotta go back a little bit, because all this wood will get removed anyway, but right about there will give me a real good fit up to the nose ring. If I look in there, I've got almost exactly the fit I need. I have to go back just a little bit more. Whoops, right about there. And I can trim off, maybe I'll trim a little bit off at a time here before I get carried away, because this is oversized on both sides. Trim 1/4 of an inch off, and then see if I can get that nice joint that I want up in the front. All of this extra round is going to get sanded off anyway. A good way to do this is lay out a piece of tape and maybe take this amount, then take half of this amount, and then half of that amount, which would be maybe 1/8 of an inch, until we just get that butt joint as close as we really feel we can get it. When you're cutting across the grain, a lot of thin slices are better. I've sliced this enough times just to get a nice even cut. If you take that amount off 3 or 4 times, or half of the amount, you'll sneak right up on having it right. And that's about as close as we can reasonably expect to get it. Now I want to get inside of here and put in some thin doublers on the inside of this block, inside of this shell, and that just gives me a little bit more material up here because I want to get a real solid joint onto the nose ring. This is one of the areas where planes tend to crack from vibration when they're some amount of time old, and certainly this one I don't want to crack ever. I can take, this is the piece of the shell that was left over. It's already got a curve already in it, so it seems like this would be a good piece to use. Again, I want to get a reasonably nice cut on this. Now what I want to do, I want to use this to give me a little bit of extra material, because we know that nose is going to taper in from every direction. So what I'd like to do is just get this will act like a doubler on here. Just tack glue this in place, get all the joints sanded off. Maybe even if I do, I'll need a third one up here. I don't know until I actually put this on. I'm going to try to maintain this angle with the knife. See, I'm trying to get this, that I have a nice footprint, a nice fat footprint to contact this. Now, because I need a little more material right up in the front here, I'm going to take another slice off of this extra block. Probably half of the amount, and repeat the same thing so I have a nice taper up in the nose. Now, of course, the trim is exactly the same once that's glued on. This is a way you can use up, now, because I made this out of a decent, or the best I had, piece of wood. I didn't want to waste this wood, but you could use certainly you could use a straight piece of wood. But being it's already had the curve in it, and being I can't really use this unless I make a half-A stunt ship or something, it's a good way to use up what would be a wasted piece of wood. Okay, before I tack glue this on and do a little shaping, I want to back cut this just a little bit, only so there wouldn't be a stress riser here. Otherwise, you've got a stress riser every time there's a double. The double should always end at a little bit of a kerf. I get a dowel or a piece of tubing with some sandpaper just to make this a little more workmanlike. But that kills some of the stress riser. And it still gives you enough material. You can see up in the front, you've got plenty of a bond to go to the nose ring where there's a lot of vibration going on. Okay, what I did, I just tacked this on in a few places. I just want to get a rough fit here. Now the main reason for doing this is I want to take away all the corners. You can see how that would normally blend in. There's still some material removed now. Having looked at this, one of the things I could have done is cut away a little more of the motor mounts. Well, yes and no, I don't think that's going to be significant. It just makes the carving and sanding will be a little more labor intensive, but these are the things, every time you do something, you'd like to make it a little better. Yeah, I could make it just a little bit thinner. I could have made it in those, because this is really a wide, I don't know if you can see it on a video, but it really is a wide body. When you go to pick it up, you normally would pick it up and all of a sudden you need to open your hand up. I think it's going to have a lot more scale look when we're finished with this. The other thing, because we have some positive motor offset in it, it's going to require taking a little more off the outside, well, a little more off the inside I should say, but just being able to dress that off now, I can get a sanding block anyway and just get that contour and get that curve as close as possible right now would be a big help. A good way to start this, or get some of the material off, is with one of these master ass screw planes with the blade set all the way in. You don't want to have the blade, because once it hits the plywood, it's going to start taking chunks out of the blade. But you can get quite a bit of the material. The reason I like to use a plane as much as possible, it keeps the sawdust in the house down. In fact, no matter where you're working, it keeps the sawdust down. The rest I can do with a sanding block, but you can, if you hold the plane on about a 45-degree angle, you can take some nice slivers off. It'll just save you, and here we go into the plywood. You can even hear it. That's the whole idea of putting that curve in the crutch. And you don't mind going through a little bit of plywood like that, but you really, in the old ways where you have a big square motor mount sticking out there, holy mackerel. You could be working, 2 hours to get rid of that. Or you could use a belt sander, I guess. But getting some of it off with the plane is certainly, as much as you can, is always a good idea. When you dig into the plywood, you know it's going to destroy the blade, so just have some extra blades ready. See how quick that takes the material off? Okay, this side sanded in real nice. This side now I need a little bit of a shim right here because remember the nose ring is offset out to this side, so I need to put a little piece of 30-second balsa in here because I don't want to fill this with epoxylite or aeropoxy or anything. I'd like this all to be wood. You can see from this angle just how much that, I'm guessing that's about a 32nd of an inch. I just take a piece of soft wood, and what I try to do is press down as hard as I can, and what it'll do, it'll leave an impression of exactly how big that piece has to be. And it doesn't matter if you make it fancy, it's all going to get block sanded in. If you just squash it down, it'll kind of fill in all the cavities. And now, of course, That's dry. It's as soon as it's dry, just block sand it right in when I block sand in this whole edge.
What I try to do is just go down and touch the nose ring. Any little gaps I can fill with balsa later. I don't want to get a super duper fit here, I just want to get it close. Because once the wing is in position, this is going to be a little more difficult to sand. It's a lot easier if you can pick it up, work on it out in the open like this anyway. Blend that little patch in for final sanding. And the only problem with this is the hard spot created by the edge of the motor mount or the plywood, which just with flow, that's nice. Now another handy use you can use this XL mat for, which I've been trying to protect the bottom of the body and keep the edge nice. When I get to do a final sanding and I know I don't want to put any chips or dings in it, just using that for a pad, real handy. Anyway, the final little bit, I want to use my hand as the guide when I've gone and gotten rid of that high point. You really have to work that little seam, which takes a little time. Now, it would be pointless to put a final finish on this, because in the final analysis, we're going to have to blend this in just a little bit more anyway. But for right now, what's important is just to get the majority of the seam out of the way so I can look inside later and see if I've got any real thin spots. Just working that hard spot.
Now I'm just trying to get this blend. This is not really the spinner I'm going to use, but it's close. That blend. Make sure from doing all the sanding I haven't lost the radius, the roundness. The next thing I want to do here, a little bit of time left here. This is about as close to being sanded in as I need for right now. I'll lay out the turtle deck mold. I basically have to do the same thing here. I will add a little dimension out to the back of the turtle deck. And what I'm thinking about doing, again, I'm not sure exactly how I want to do this. I'm thinking of just making 2 layers of 3/32, one on top of the other, just to, well, I really don't like to do that. I'd like to do the laminate, but anyway, I'm going to try. Being that wood bent so nice the first time, maybe I can get one good bend out of it again. But it really will have to be at least the minimum of 3/32 more on each side. So this is a good test to see just how much you have to change your mold to get those parts. Now it seems like we got away with getting the bottom and the little nose piece, but this will be a real challenge. So I have a couple pieces of good, well, I shouldn't say good wood left, a little better than mediocre wood left.
The first thing I have to figure out is the length, and I know I can't get it out of a 4-inch piece, so what I'm going to have to do is put a joint, I may as well do that right away, so that in effect I'm making up the thing that's similar to a wing skin. Now there's a lot of ways to do it. One of the ways I don't want to do it, I don't want to have a seam going right down the top. That's the most obvious place you're going to see. I like to have the seam, and I'm going to make 2 pieces, one on each edge, so that the seams wind up down around here where I can bury them in silk span. I don't want them up here on the top where you're going to see them. And I'd like to, instead of having 1 seam way up here, I can get 2 much closer to the bottom. So in effect what I have to do is make up a thing similar to a wing skin for a sheeted wing with 2 seams, 1 on each side. I want to see just how much I have to add to this. Probably 1 inch on each side, so I can join this up. Lay this right in the center. Lay this on its side, and there's roughly the angle that I need right there. That's roughly the angle of the piece that I'm going to need on for each one of the skins. Okay, before we join it together and put a center line and everything on it, this is what our sheet is going to look like. Now obviously another thing, you want to take the part of the wood that looks the most flexible or the most A-grain and put that toward the back. That's where it's going to have to bend the most. The trick is get a nice straight edge on it, of course, and leave the dust on. Don't take the dust off. The dust is what helps it make a nice clean seam. Now once I have the seams as straight as I want them to, see if I had somebody else here now, I'd have them press this together, but there's a little technique you can use. If you can get just a little bit of pressure on it, close the seam as you go and just drop the tape down. We're really not going to see this seam, but we still would like to get it as clean as possible. Now you can look at this side and see if you're going to see when that opens up, it's like a little door hinge, that you have a nice straight seam to work with. One of the things you can do, there's always a little gap, it's never really a totally perfect seam. What I'm doing is sanding it nice and smooth and just letting the sawdust fill up the crack. By the way, Scott Smith, or now I guess Ken has it has a real good tape on joining sheeting. It has a lot of little tricks and tips and whatnot. I'm twisting the Q-tip as I go, just letting it twist in my finger, just so that little seam with the sawdust in it fills up with glue. Don't hit it with kicker, kind of let it kick off. The sawdust actually will kick it off for you. And you should have an almost perfect glue seam, whether it's wing sheeting or fuselage sides or whatever. A lot of times when you pull this up, you'll see some of the CA went down into the glue. You want to dress that off, get rid of of course you want to hit this side with glue also, but you want to get rid of that, the glue that's on the tape first, and usually it'll come right off. It'll kind of chewing gum up for you. want to make a little shim to go around this. And what I did, I taped the wood, put a little splice on it. This will bend right around. I want to pretty much get a, oops, sure it will, Wendy. And what I can do here, being I was trying to experiment here, I was trying not to wet this wood down, but it looks like I'm going to have to. I can glue this seam back. Actually, I can just tape this on. Let me get some tape. Again, as you go along, you usually find things you can and cannot do. Now, this wood split. All we're trying to do is establish a little bit of a, make this a little bit bigger. What I try is putting some tape on the outside of this before I wet it down, just to hold it, to keep it from splitting apart. Because this wood is really old and it's really dried out. Again, since we haven't used this mold this way, you expect a couple of disappointments along the way, and that's normal. What I did, I wrapped the whole thing, I got the shim on there, wrapped the whole thing with postal tape. Just want to get out some of the wrinkles. That looks like it'll build a mold up a 1/16 of an inch, which will probably be about the right amount. But now what I want to do is cover this with masking tape. It'll even build it up just a little bit more. So when you're trying to create things and you're trying to make new things that you've never done before, a lot of times they're not going to work. That's just the reality of it. But we'll find out if this is going to give us a turtle deck without having to carve a plug. The worst that can happen here is you go get a block of wood and carve a plug. In fact, what I think I'll do here, just thinking about this, I'll cover the whole thing with tape. The wire, I need to put another piece of wire on because I've totally buried the wire. That'll be my parting line. And I'm going to try to move it down maybe 1/8 of an inch just to give me a little more material here, which is the whole idea of making the shell just a little bit wider and bigger in all dimensions all at the same time. This certainly is about 1/10 the work of carving a new plug and zero money. Boy, that zero money is getting to be a big thing. It cost a good blocks of balsa wood. Okay. So now we have a new parting line I can use. I can put my finger in when you gouge it out. Get any wrinkles that are still in the tape out. Since we're going to sand it anyway, it won't really make a big difference. Okay, that's all taped up. Time for an experiment. We'll red up the piece and wrap it like a mummy. I always mark up the side that's, the glue seam is a little rougher on one side than the other. Try to take the nice side for the outside, of course. Get back, take a deep breath, and anytime you want a little demonstration of what happens to wood when it gets wet, just take some olive oil and put it on one side of a piece of wood. Get ready to choke. There it goes. That's what happens to wood when it gets wet. It's more likely going to crack in the back when we go to wrap this, so I'm really trying to pre-bend it as much as I can. And obviously where there's a glue seam, it's rock hard, so good thing we have it down there. It's not running across the part that we want to get the maximum curve in. You can even see as the wood, you give it 5-10 minutes, it starts to really be like a birch bark canoe. It assumes its own shape. And this is one good job. If you could do this outside, of course, you wouldn't have to breathe all the ammonia fumes. Okay, I want to try to get the pins right on the center line. I may have to trim a little bit of this off. I made this a little oversized. You don't want to have too much of this hanging off. I just don't want to have too much of this hanging off, because what it does, it buckles it back up under the plug. Every time you get to a pin, of course, just pull a pin back. Going to be a little careful to just go slow and try to get as few wrinkles in this as possible in the ace bandage. And we'll see when this dries up tomorrow. We're about at the end of modeling time today, but we certainly will look forward to seeing if this works. This will add just one more dimension. I can almost infinitely go on making these bigger and bigger and bigger as long as I can keep making the plugs bigger. Split right at the back, but again, that's not a big deal. The rudder's going to go there anyway. And that's real easy to make a little repair on. Now for the next, I guess, 4 or 5 minutes, just going to keep squeezing this guy down. It'll set the wood cells, put it up by the heating vent to dry overnight. And hopefully when we come back tomorrow, we'll have a part that will be a much closer fit than if we didn't put all these shimming on the mold. Let's give it 5 minutes. Fuselage is starting to shape up, starting to look like an airplane. And I can't wait to get started on that wing. See, the object is to get all the work on the fuselage done before the wing is in your way. Then when you have all the blocks, everything's carved, hollowed, cowling, putting the wing will be no problem at all. It'll be a lot easier than if you do it the other way. You build a wing and a body when you make an I-beamer, and what happens, the wing is in every way you go to sand it and touch it and poke it, and your elbow goes through it. I think this will be a little bit of a time saving. Again, we'll find out. An awful lot of people have expressed interest in this project, so I feel, like if I can make some gains, great. If I can't, I know I can always build it the old-fashioned way. But maybe we can come up with something even a little bit better. So it was a pretty good session, wall and wall. Got that done. And got that guy hanging up by the vent. So next time we get to work on it, we should know if we're going to be able to use these little shims and things, or just how accurate. And this one is about as good as I would ever expect, so I have high hopes, but we'll see next time we get to come down here. See, this is what I love about old age. Time to go to work. Got done playing toy airplanes for a while. I come up to my bird feeder. There's birds all over the place. There was 50 birds here 2 minutes ago. I run downstairs, get the video camera, come up. There isn't a single bird in the air. Every bird in North Jersey is gone. It's unbelievable. The minute they know you have a video camera, they disappear. I mean, does it get any better than this? A pot of coffee, copy of Model Aviation, a copy of Classic Toy Trains, and not one bird in my feeder today. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I'm getting boycotted. There you go. Look at this Leroy Black Spitfires. Look at this. Great. Holtz Apple's playing. We had that on video. It's almost like a replay of Wendy's video. And still no birds. I bet the birds are all out by Brodax. I bet he puts more seeds out than I do. I got $9 a pound seeds out here. Could be buying prime balsa wood. Check this out. This is Peter's water. And it is in the AMA magazine. It's just things you never think of. Peter, or Piotr you should say, when I was in Poland and saw him in '87, but I think he was working on this Model M. This is the same one, I think. But anyway, what's funny is he was a nominee for the Hall of Fame, and he
sent in this tremendous pack, but it got here because of the mail 2 or 3 days late, so probably they'll put it in next year. But I'll tell you, this guy is one dedicated model boy. Unbelievable. Hey, I might have sent him a copy of this magazine. A picture of Dan Banjock when he was a baby. Oh, it's a pretty good issue of Model Aviation. I can't believe it, in this issue of Model Aviation. This is Charlie Reeves of Paducah, Kentucky. And Charlie, I just sent Charlie a copy of that 1962 Nats video because he's on it. Look at this, he's building giant RC scale planes or something here. Pretty cool. Look at Model Aviation, all these pictures of the planes hovering. Did these guys just invent this? I mean, Banjock's been doing this for years with his, the Bislab. I guess they're into Bislab RC now. Hard to believe. Anyway, sitting down with the magazine, it's a good lunch. I wonder the size of some of these RC models. They're like sweepers. You guys are only about 30 years too late. I had you beat. Look at this. Pretty cool. Well, it must be nice to be rich. I tell Karen that I'm getting frustrated not being able to get enough birds in my bird feeder. See, when I had the big bird feeder, I could get all the birds I wanted. With this little feeder, at least until my neighbor passes away from natural causes. Anyway, she buys me this book, and like I always do, I love reading books. I tell you, I'm a self-educated bird watcher. Anyway, I did do a lot of reading, and I found out 2 things. The reason we're not getting blue jays coming up there is blue jays like peanuts. So I'm going to, probably in the next week, make up a blue jay feeder and make a little other feeder. But I want birds. Boy, I love sitting and having lunch or supper or something, breakfast even, and just watching the birds. Life is definitely more than just, hey, just more than airplanes. Airplanes and classic toy trains. Would your life be empty without all these things? I mean, just think about it. Think about how many things there are in life to enjoy. How many things you could spend your whole life studying and still not be an expert. And a lot of things to live for. Oh, my fish, my pond. I went out by the pond. The fish are all dormant. Unbelievable. There is a lot to live for. And hey, the reason I say is because like with Model Aviation, classic trains, the bird magazines, you know, the fun of life is in the doing, not in just sitting around and getting old, especially when you're as old as I am. You got to kind of do things just to keep active, and hey, these guys keep me active. Now I'm just looking, one of the things that I've run into a problem, and John Brodak is going to try to help me solve it, is I'm wearing out a pair of scissors every week. We're making so many of these nobler cowlings, and I'm looking through the catalog here to see, this is the pair of scissors. This is probably not the right scissors. I know they make scissors with different cutting angles for Kevlar and for E-glass, so I hope John's going to be able to turn me up some little bit higher. Maybe you're supposed to use something like this, super shears. I don't know. Anyway, the fellow that we've been sending videos out to at Excel, he apparently really likes the videos and told John that he really thought they were good. So anyway, if they're so good, get me about a half a dozen pair of scissors. Anyway, these people have been really nice to work with and work for. Anyway, we're at the end of the tape. Unfortunately, no birds today. A no bird day, but at least it's a Spitfire day. Anyway, thanks a lot for joining us, and please pass the tapes around to all your friends. Share the information. Send them down to Argentina and Brazil if you can. Hey, we love trains too. Don't forget the classic toy trains. Don't forget Lionel trains. Real steam engines. There sure is an awful lot of things to live for. I just can't wait to get some more time to spend, and this time has really been limited. Oh, but we're making progress. Yeah, you might not believe it, but that's me on the cover of the magazine. 1976.
So I'm right here.